Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining in. We just have one more person joining. We'll just wait for them to. Amazing. Okay, we had to reconsider the timing for today's session because we have a lot of people joining in from all over the world. So to keep time zones more feasible, we decided on 5 p.m. So welcome to today's session. For those of you that have stuck with us since the beginning, special thank you. And for the newcomers, and for those of you who don't know, Rummān Collective is a platform founded by 4 individuals, Alexis, Dania, Duha, and myself, Nava, to bridge the gap between early career artists transitioning into the art world. With learning being one of our core objectives, we're running ReadArt, a book club that encourages you to read about the art and to hopefully understand it better, and to carry forward this dialogue within the art community for, by engaging this dialogue and educating people at the same time. We have chosen Sarah Thornton's 7 Days in the Art World for this season's book club. And this is also because we thought that, it's essential to learn about the functioning of the art world. And in my opinion, this is a really good book if you're planning to, think about getting into the art world or just want to have a peek of how it functions. Sarah Thornton is the author, and she is an art writer and a sociologist. And she basically covers various definitions of art throughout this book. She's written it in a way where she has captured a day in the life accounts of various art professionals and practitioners across New York, London, Basel, Venice, and Tokyo. She defines the art world to be conflicted clusters of subcultures that she's divided into various chapters that are like the art, the studio visit, the fair, the auction, the magazine, and so on. Each week, we discuss one chapter as to not only encourage people to read, hopefully, but also learn about the functioning of the art world. And this way is to, taking this book as a starting point. We have our own day in the life narratives and accounts by inviting various guest speakers from similar fields that the book covers. So with that, today we are joined with Sophie Arni, who is a young editor-in-chief and the founder of Global Art Daily, which is a publication that covers global contemporary art with editors based in the UAE, UK, US, and Japan. Thank you so much, Sophie, for joining us all the way from Japan.
Thank you.
Pleasure for us to have you here. As always, we will unravel the chapter together by asking Sophie questions and that are related to, the importance of art writing and why it's meant to give so much meaning to something that is as visual as art. Feel free to jump in if you have any questions, any comments, or you can just drop them in the chat box or just unmute yourself. Moving on to the chapter that we'll be talking about today, the magazine. It speaks about the art magazine Art Forum, describing its daily functioning, the production of it, the design, what goes into all of that, as well as how advertising in and at the company takes place. In the book, Sarah has written the Art Forum to be, she says, Art Forum is to art what Vogue is to fashion and Rolling Stone is to rock and roll. It's a trade magazine with crossover cachet and an institution with controversial clout. So we'll be speaking more about it, but since this book was written back in somewhere around 2008, we'll be taking more of a contemporary approach and a recent example, something that's closer to us, and see how the course has changed over the years. So in the beginning of the chapter, Sarah speaks to Charles Guarino, who is one of the 3 publishers of Art Forum, and it's written, a publisher has to worry about everything, says Guarino. My job is to mind everybody else's business and try not to act like it. So, Sophie, what's a typical day in the life of an editor-in-chief of an art magazine like?
That's a beautiful segue. Thank you. Because it's kind of like this. It's kind of knowing where everyone is and what everyone is interested in, but trying to keep it all professional as well. I mean, first of all, I want to thank you so much for the invitation. I think it's an amazing initiative that you started, and also just talking about different parts of the art world through book reviews. I think it's a very cool approach. I think we can all share ideas and thoughts. And I remember reading 7 Days in the Art World and being like, when I first even thought about working in this thing called the art world, and it gave a very, very good overview, global also, not just like US centric. She kind of went through Asia as well a little bit, and kind of discovering, the inner workings. Now, I also have to preface this that Global Art Daily is definitely a young publication. We're not Art Forum by any means of the sense, and we're hoping maybe one day to be, but we're definitely in the early stage.
Yeah, we're getting there.
But so I mean, your question of day in the life, I would say that's the beautiful thing with the art world in general. It changes every day. Like, you don't have a typical day. So I usually get up, look at my emails, look at Instagram DMs, check, because I'm also running Global Art Daily's Instagram, so check how that all of it is going, if we have DMs in our inboxes, etc. Try to reply to everybody. It's very important to prioritize because you have a lot of things going on at the same time. You check the editorial calendar, you make sure that everything is running, that the articles, the images are coming from the people you need, the high res images, they're coming. You need to check if this person has been, you gave a deadline and the deadline is approaching, you send a kind reminder. You kind of check, and then you check what everyone is doing in terms of the editors. Like, we have our editorial board, so I'm in contact. I want to say sometimes it changes, like sometimes we're very active on a daily basis, all of us are connecting. Sometimes it's more on a weekly basis that we're connecting. It changes every day, but the good thing with Global Art Daily, in the sense that we are such a super young publication and we're not necessarily monetized, and that really gives us a lot of freedom as well. We're not, like, comparing us to Art Forum, for example, is a bit of a, let's say, of a stretch, because we don't have advertisers to answer to, for example, which is great because that would give a whole other layer to this job. But it's good in the sense that we have more freedom, and that, conversations can happen, and all of us have different jobs as well. Like, all of us are doing, whether it's a day job, whether it's being a curator, whether it's being at school still, all of us have all the editors have different kind of commitments. So it's also about juggling that. So yeah, and I would say at least I give 1-2 hours a day to writing. So whether I'm writing an article or editing, so that's really time off that you have to just like put your phone away, put the emails away, and just like focus and produce. And then sometimes it's Instagram, so then, kind of checking the Instagram captions, picking the images that would go on our Instagram page, and a lot of Zooms, a lot of phone calls, a lot of saying hi to everybody. So yeah, that would be the day in the life.
That's good. I think it's good that you mentioned the difference between Art Forum and Global Art Daily. I mean, yeah, of course, it's a young publication, but it's mentioned in the book as well how Art Forum is literally the magazine of the art world. So it's good when it comes to in comparison. In another instance, since you've been dealing with Global Art Daily, even though it's a young publication, Sarah talks about the importance of reaching out to the audience you're writing for, especially when it comes to like language. In one part of the chapter, she mentions Ida Panicelli expanded the international coverage further, but as English was not her mother tongue, Art Forum suffered from what an insider called the wrong kind of unreadability. Of course, there's art speak that, in my opinion, makes it lesser accessible to the audience. But at the same time, when talking about language itself, we've become so deeply rooted to the third culture, and lingua franca has become more common. So I assume we've obviously evolved from that. But how do you, as editor-in-chief, ensure that your magazine doesn't get the wrong kind of unreadability?
Yeah, that's a great question, especially for Global Art Daily, because we want to cover a wide geographic range. We were born in Abu Dhabi, and we have a lot of our editors and writers based in the UAE, but we also have them based in Asia, based in US. So this question of the lingua franca of like what would be the language of Global Art Daily came up a lot in our conversations. And we, of course, we decided on, because most of us are fluent in English, and that's kind of our basis. And I feel like in the art world in general, as you travel and as you start your careers, and you'll see wherever in the world you are, you end up using English. A lot of the art, contemporary art theory and talk is in English. And so for us, it's really interesting because we have a lot of contributors whose, you know, my native language is in English, you know. So I know how it feels to be writing in not your mother tongue, and how sometimes, but that's the thing with Global Daily that we're trying to do, is that we're trying to shine light on stories that would not otherwise be told, and shine light on artists, not necessarily from the art centers, but from the peripheries. And sometimes that means English is not their mother tongue. And it's for us, it's our job as editors to, because we have been given this education, when we have this kind of level of English. And Sarah Thornton as well mentioned that, you know, all the editors at Art Forum are graduates of Ivy Leagues or the UK equivalents. Let's say at Global Art Daily, it's true that a majority, like all of us actually graduated from NYU Abu Dhabi, because that's how kind of the network grew. And NYU Abu Dhabi gave us such a beautiful education, and we are privileged in that sense to speak that level of, and to be able to edit that level of English. And so that's the level of English we want to produce. And in terms of readability, you said it right, like there's a lot of art talk, and that's something that we receive press releases all the time, and they are in art talk. And of course, a lot of the artists as well, when you interview them, a lot of them mention often those keywords, and so a lot of keywords that you have to kind of juggle through. But I think we have done a pretty good job at balancing more of the kind of standard kind of contemporary art review, or this kind of art talk that I think is important to have in a publication, because it's kind of, as much as we like to kind of get away with it, it is our lingua franca, and it's good to be able to be on the same level of conversation as other publications worldwide, because we're really trying to, you know, elevate this conversation that's happening locally to a global level. But it's also very important to have personal, you know, reviews, and when you read a review from somebody who you can feel their passion, you can feel them walking through the exhibition as you read the text, like you can really have the sense of them, you know, they use the first person, they really kind of go deep. I think that gives a whole other readability, and it unlocks a new audience that not necessarily knows about contemporary art, but is interested. And you know, that kind of creates, so yeah, very important.
Then I think now is a good time to ask, how do you know what your audience wants?
How do I know what my audience wants? So that was definitely trial and error with Global Art Daily. I mean, from the start, at first I thought, okay, let's just create these big exhibition, you know, kind of these mentions of the exhibitions happening worldwide, and we just kind of do a contemporary art publication that way. But then I realized, no, what the audience wants, at least in our case, is because most of our audience is based in the UAE, they want to learn about local stories. They want to have in-depth interviews with artists that are part of their community. And they want to learn something that, you know, they wouldn't necessarily be able to learn from a 500-word short exhibition review in some kind of major publication, because we have the liberty to go way more in depth. We don't have a word limit. Often our articles are super, super long. And in a way, like, we create a very niche audience, because like, who wants to sit down and read all of this? But we've actually realized that no, a lot of our audience is actually other artists, and we create a community that way. And I think that actually speaks to publishing and art publication today as being a catalyst for community building, because everybody is talking about, you know, community building. I feel like that the museum wanted, the institutions wanted, all these new, you know, digital, like the Rummān, like the digital collective, want to create a sense of community. And I think publishing and archiving is almost like a way to do that.
Definitely, I 100% agree with that. Shifting towards artists, there is this part in the book where she mentions that somewhat like a Turner Prize victory or nomination, an art forum front cover, feature, or sometimes even a review can have a tremendous impact on an artist's career. As a contemporary art magazine, how do you think Global Art Daily is enhancing artists' careers?
That's a great question too. I think we have a role in the emerging art scene in the UAE. I think just in terms of, for example, all the shows that we covered at Maysan 15, that was this, it still is the restaurant / gallery run by Rami Farouk. And we covered a lot of, like, from the inaugural show all the way to almost every show that happened, we covered it. And we've seen actually that the people who reviewed the different shows eventually became curators of that show, or artists, or one of our design collaborators, Amina, was actually became, she was a painter as well, and was shown as in part of a show that was curated by Sara Daher, who's also a contributor at Global Art Daily. So we almost, thanks to this platform that is just it's a website, it's like it's a website where we publish pretty high, I would say, high level contemporary art criticism. We engage in those conversations and we kind of nurture this talent that eventually comes together through these physical installations and exhibitions. And through that, I think we've kind of helped to grow. I mean, I had this quote that I highlighted from the book, and I thought it was really telling of the UAE art scene, especially. One second, if I find it. Basically saying that, the last thing you get in the art infrastructure is the art critic, right? That at first you start with a house, then you get a street light, a gas station, a supermarket, a performing arts center, a museum, and the very last thing you get is an art critic. And I thought that was really telling for the UAE art scene, because I mean, when I started GAD in 2015, of course, it was Canvas. Before us, it was Bidoon, and there are many were not the first art publication in the UAE. But at that time and point in time, I looked around and I didn't see any independent, publications, whether it was print or web, that was focused on contemporary art from the region, with contributors from not just the region, but the UAE specifically, which I think is a very, very interesting hodgepodge of different nationalities and of different realities. And I couldn't see that being reflected, right, in contemporary art writing. And I thought, in a way, it's because, I mean, the institutions are just being built in terms of these big museums, right? And of course, the Sharjah Art Center existed for already 10 years at that point, but there's many, newness in terms of that. And I thought, it's important to have critics critique intelligibly, with honesty, with care. It's important to have art criticism go hand in hand with art production and then with art exhibition, because otherwise we just consume, right? And we just look at the exhibitions and maybe we have thoughts to share, but we don't have a space to share them, or we just share them intimately with our group of friends or a small circle of collectives. But why not share it to a broader audience? And we have this beautiful thing called the internet, so why not just, and so that's how I would think, if I answered your question, just related specifically to the UAE, like we've helped, I think, forge meaningful approaches to contemporary art, and hopefully help to, some artists' careers with reviews. And also one last thing before I forget, that I thought it was beautiful one time, I think Sara Daher told this to me. She was like, an exhibition is temporary, but a review lasts forever. And I think, especially when you think of online publications, our goal is that, Global Art Daily will exist, and then almost forever. I mean, as much as we keep paying the domain name, and that, in the future, people can Google about this exhibition or what's happening in the UAE, and they have this archive they can go back to and they can read about the exhibition. I'm always thinking about what in 30 or 40 years, what would happen? What would people think about what was happening during this time, in this scene? And hopefully archive that well.
Yeah, I think the archive itself becomes, an archive is everlasting. So it's very beautiful the way that you mentioned this. It's nice. But in terms of exhibitions, how do you decide, or how do your editors decide which exhibition is worth reviewing?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because again, one of the quotes from the book was, what we don't publish is as telling as what we publish, right? And it's true. It's like, and we got this feedback from one of our readers saying that, you know, a lot of the publications in the UAE, including us, often just write glowing reviews about exhibitions, like we're not very critical. And that was a conversation we had internally with the editors, and we're thinking, how do we become more critical? I was of the point of view that, you know, this is such a young art scene that I don't want to, you know, bash any efforts. Like, I want to just keep promoting. I want to shine light, especially on positive things. And in a way, like, I was happy to reread this chapter and seeing that Art Forum kind of has this same approach of like, we are gonna review and publish exhibitions that we think are worth it. And if we don't publish, that means that we personally don't think they are being worth, you know, kind of publishing about or writing reviews about. Now, that's not necessarily true because we are, you know, self-funded volunteer publication. So oftentimes it's just a matter of time and human resource, and maybe we don't have enough people, we're super busy with articles that we miss something. So it's not like everything that we don't publish is not, you know, being worth publishing. But how we decide, we get press releases, our editors, I mean, I like hear, you know, like, for example, I don't know, Danny comes to me and he has an idea, or Sherry comes to me, or Ashraf comes to me, and I'm like, okay, let me see, have a look. What I love is that all our editors have different points of views, are in different spaces, are interested in different art scenes. So that's super, it gives fresh perspectives, it gives fresh ideas. And then I try to see of maybe, I always try to keep the widest umbrella and have not too much of everything, just have a little bit of different art scenes, or sometimes it's about like a relationship that you want to foster with someone, or something sparks your eye and you want to delve deeper into it. Or some chat, like right now we're really into these kinds of digital art, NFTs. We just published this interview with this Japanese founder of a Japanese blockchain art company, which I invite all of you to read. It's fascinating. And this kind of like prompts me to think more about these digital art exhibitions, and we're having a lot of incoming reviews and interviews about that. So sometimes it's waves. It's really fluid. It's really fluid.
Super interesting. Okay, moving on to the essence of art magazines. In the book, there's this quote. It says, if you can't have intellectual dialogue in an art magazine, then where in the world are you going to have it? Why else do you think are art magazines important in the art world? Do you think enough people read about art or art magazines at all?
That's a great question, because I was struggling so much with this in the beginning. I was writing mostly myself with just maybe one or two other contributors. And it was tough in the beginning because you write, you put online, it was a blog turned publication. And you realize, okay, not many people are looking at this. You look at the numbers, you're like, okay, I'm putting all this effort, and maybe, you know, a couple of people clicked on this link who actually had the time to go and read. And I was feeling really sad. And I was like, that's true that I'm doing this more because this intellectual simulation, right? I had this urge. I was looking at all of these exhibitions and I wanted to get to know the artists, right? And so I would either interview them or I would write myself what I felt about this work of art. And in a way, you have to realize that whatever you put out eventually comes back to you. And that's something I've realized beautifully in 2020, that years of doing this actually forms, if you're an art critic, for example, listening, like if you think that people are not going to read your article today, they will read it eventually, and tomorrow, in a year or in 2 years, or not they will read, but you will find a community of people who will read your articles. This I promise. Whatever you put out and however you kind of brand yourself, because in a way, the more exhibition reviews or artist interviews you write, you become known as an art critic, right? And so you will more and more meet like-minded people. It's just the way the universe works, especially now online. If you post often, you get to know, I've gotten to know so many people through Instagram, even more people even than through, just this past year of the pandemic, we were all at home, great way to network. But in general, you will find your like-minded crew. You will, like, it's just a matter of time. But and once you find that like-minded, community of people, then it's good because they read your articles, and then they engage with it, and then they start writing articles themselves maybe, and then that's how at least we grew. But yeah, the sense of like, we do it especially because we're volunteer, etc. Like, it's very much an intellectual kind of pursuit that we're all a part of, with the artists, because art is, again, it's a reflection, it's a mirror of our times, and so we need people to shine light on it, and the role of the critic is incredibly important to be able to be a vehicle, like a not a vehicle, but I would say like to shine light on what the artist's true meanings or intents are, and be a bridge. I would say it's more of a role of a bridge between the art and the audience.
Speaking about how you've said that more people are writing about it and more people are becoming art critics, they are becoming more common than ever. And throughout the chapter, Sarah also discusses art writing and art criticism and how they go hand in hand. Why do you think writing about art is important to begin with? Something that is as visual as art, why does it need to be written about?
Right. Well, sometimes you look at a work of art and there's just way too many emotions and way too many thoughts that are running into your head. And that's when it's a great piece of artwork. It's a great piece of art, like you kind of, you sense just, it's almost like it takes you over. It just brings way too many thoughts and references. Sometimes you've studied art history, or you've studied literature, whatever you've studied before. You could study science even, and it brings connections. And when you have these connections and you're in front of a work of art, it almost is kind of a solitary experience. You're just by yourself in front of this artwork. And so I think it's just about a matter of communicating. I think art critics are mostly people who want to communicate what they are feeling inside, and through this medium of art criticism. And so it's almost like a dialogue that they enter with the artwork, or they want to know more about the artist eventually. So they will write a exhibition review or something, and then get in touch with the artist based on that piece of writing, because that kind of is a good foundation to have deeper discussions. I would say it's definitely an urge to communicate, and then art in general is so complex, right? And so coming back to this idea of the bridge, especially art that is very socially rooted or politically inclined, sometimes there needs to be people who can explain these messages to an audience who may not be familiar with these messages. And so that's how the art critic becomes some kind of mediator, and I think that's super important.
This is something you mentioned earlier as well. The chapter as well includes many instances wherein the magazine becomes an entity of its own, separate from the art market in particular. How have contemporary art magazines, in your opinion, evolved over time in separating themselves, or maybe even including themselves more with the art markets?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think that is such an important point, especially in that chapter. And I recommend everybody to read, because Sarah Thornton really goes deep into sometimes you view an art critic or art publication as being the power, right? Like they have the final say in a way, that they will make or break an artist's career, etc. Nowadays, you would think that maybe this version is actually, you can link it to social media, right? Because it's very much a conversation that we're having digitally right now, with all these art publications online and social media and comments, and you definitely see that the art world there's a sense of power, of hierarchy, of people that are important, of people that you want to impress, right? That people you want to have on your good side. And Sarah explains how do you gain that power is almost by being detached from the market, because there was an instance where a gallery really wanted for their exhibition to be reviewed by the art forum, but then the editor said, listen, the moment, and the gallery was willing to pay a premium or some kind of extra advertising or something. And the editor said, no, but the moment I accept this is the moment whatever power you think I have disappears, because that's the exact reason why I'm powerful, is because I can take a step back and I'm independent and I will review your show and people will read what I'm writing, knowing that I wasn't paid to write it, right? And in that sense, like, we have done this pretty good job at Global Art Daily because we are independent and we don't have advertising. So in a way, we are free to write whatever we want, and we are free to be completely critical or to dismiss any exhibitions that we think are not, being kind of enough material to talk over. But also we are in the sense of, we know that we're a player in this art scene. And so it's a lot of knowing, when to be kind to someone, to be more critical. We try to have an objective voice though, because I truly believe that is so true. The definition of power is being able to have your own independent thoughts, not linked with the market. But yeah, I mean, it's a complex question. We can talk more about it. If someone has follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer.
I think coming towards the end of the chapter, the chapter ends by saying the mission of the magazine is to privilege the arts. It's the only way to bring meaning to all of this. Otherwise, we're just killing trees. Now, I understand Global Art Daily is both print and online publication, but do you think art magazines or Global Art Daily in specific accomplishes this privileging the arts?
In terms of being online or versus being in print? Just
in general, both combined.
I mean, for sure, like we are, just in terms of online and print, like we were in print. And so that's also been an amazing experience. And I kind of recommend everybody who even thinks about starting their own publication or doing anything of that sort to consider print, because it gives much more weight. You realize once you design on InDesign and then send something to print and receive the copy in your hands, how that you've actually produced an object that will outlast you, versus online sometimes feels so ephemeral and transient, and you realize the amounts of the extent to which people are willing to contribute to print issues versus digital publications. And that's super important to see. And I think that experience definitely impacted how we viewed e-issues and the level at which we fact check and we copy edit and we make sure our captions are correct, everything, because we had this print experience. So that's super important. In terms of your question of kind of like the art scene and being able to kind of, have a shine light and bring awareness to different artists. Instagram has been a huge thing for us, like we on social media, being able to relate our very niche, very lengthy artist interviews and exhibition reviews to a wider audience on Instagram of artists worldwide or in galleries worldwide has been a blessing. I think the art community, the social media of choice is Instagram, and it's very important to be active on there. And it's you can find people and reach people who can then become really, they become loyal readers and through just the power of social media. So I think that's important. And we always try to shine light on artists or art scenes that have perhaps stereotypes being placed on it and try to change these stereotypes. And I think art, especially contemporary art, has the power to do that more than any other medium. That's why I'm in this art world. I really truly believe that art has this power of communication beyond language that can, go across borders.
That's 100% true, yes. We can start taking questions. So if you guys have any questions, do feel free to unmute yourself or drop them in the chat box. Meanwhile, I will come to my last question for Sophie, which is, do you think the art magazine, so this is not in particularly like specific to Global Art Daily, but in general, being a part of like, the art magazine community, do you think it's become its own niche wherein like it's perhaps difficult? Like, I would assume that art writing or the purpose for art magazines is to have artists out there. Do you think it's become so exclusive as to maybe, exclude that purpose of it?
Yeah, no, good question. I mean, this comes back to a question of audience, and something I grappled with in the beginning, trying to be like, let's try to reach, at the beginning, it was really my mantra is like trying to reach non-art audience, right? Like trying to make them involved and interested in contemporary art. As much as I want that, and I think hopefully we'll try to do that. We'll try to convert people into becoming more art people after reading. What I've realized is you can make the most impact in your own community. So try to find like-minded people, which are like, for an art publication, our main readership are artists, are curators, are mostly artists, actually, more than curators, which is funny, or I mean, other art critics. Because artists want to, that's their life, like their livelihood is based on them, being practicing artists, making works, always being exposed to new ideas, knowing what's going on in the art world, knowing what critics are talking about, knowing the different trends, knowing artists have made a commitment to dedicating their life to art. So of course, I think personally, I mean, from Global Art Daily, I've seen that they are the most loyal readers and they are like the main readership. And it's almost like we do it for the artists, because we also interview them, right? And they become contributors as well. Sometimes artists, you think artists, like you have this stereotype, artists can't write. This is completely untrue. Like, of course, they can write beautifully. They can critique other works beautifully. They can sense that visual language because they come from it too. And it's really interesting when I see, artists being talk about other artists' works, and you see it more often now with a lot of artists being curators and this sense of artists versus curators, that line being blurred. I think art critic, if you're a good art critic, you're definitely going to be a good curator. You can be a good independent curator because you've thought about different how all of the exhibition space works. You've thought about work placement, artists already, mostly because you write about them, maybe you contact them directly, so you have a network. So I've often seen with Global Art Daily, like you begin with writing an exhibition review and then that turns into an exhibition maybe later on. So in that sense, if I remember your question, it was about I went far away. I'm sorry.
No, I believe you answered the question well.
Okay.
I just want to know if art magazines have become too exclusive, like, just
exclusive. Yes. Let me just come back to this point of inclusive. So in a way, like we are kind of targeting this niche audience and becoming more and more niche. But we are inclusive in the sense that whoever wants to join this community can, if they're really willing to participate in this art world, and if they're emerging critics or artists, of course, like and that's our main mission with Global Daily, being super inclusive of all nationalities as well, and all regions of the world. So yeah,
that's good to know. As an artist, that's good to know. Well, that's pretty much it from my side. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them right now in the chat box, or if you're comfortable, you can unmute yourself and ask Sophie while we have her here. Sophie, do you have any advice for young art writers in making?
Okay. Well, first of all, you just have to start, because I know at first it's maybe scary, like you write on your little laptop and you don't want to share it with the world. You think it's like not that great, or or you have, I mean, I've seen people start off with super radical views and they want to go in and they want to be like super critical or like super crazy about some exhibition that's very controversial. I've seen it both ways. I would say it's great to, because it is a solitary exercise. You know, when you look at when you go and you visit an exhibition and you decide to write about it, you are alone with your computer and you are in your thoughts, and it's very, very personal. And I think my advice would be just reach out to one person. It doesn't need to be the whole world, but it's just one person that you trust. Or reach out if you have the guts, and I definitely recommend you do reach out to somebody who is experienced in art writing already, has published some articles already, or an editor of a magazine. Just reach out, you never know. And then attach your draft. Make sure your draft already is in correct grammar, etc. Like do a little bit of work with that, but just know that it's, you know, it's your first piece of writing, for example. It's totally fine. Just reach out and see, you know, if it can get, either ask for advice for an editor. I think it's better than to ask directly for it to be published. Ask for advice on how I can better this or better that, or what their thoughts are about this exhibition. And you never know, the editor or this person whose experience could read it and think it's fascinating and forward it to some person, and then, you know, it can be published. It's not, it's not as intimidating or unapproachable as it is. And mostly I can say as like editors, like we are looking to have constant rate of articles coming in all the time. So we are looking at new, fresh ideas, and we want to have fresh voices, and we want to have exciting articles that will get people to talk about them. And I would say also one of the last advice is the personal element. So the more you unveil yourself, because it can be very tempting to kind of be very neutral about everything and not necessarily give your own opinion, because that is scary. Like you're putting yourself out there, especially if it's published, that the artist will read it and you're like, oh. But just writing, from what I've seen, what works best in terms of articles for GAD has been articles that are very, like the writer has given a piece of themselves, let's say, in that article. You can feel it. You can feel the heart and you can feel the passion. So yeah.
Have you been in I don't know if trouble is the right word, but for a piece that you've written?
Oh, have I been, sorry, I couldn't hear
in trouble? Or like, have you?
Trouble? Not necessarily, because I'm quite like let's say a neutral voice. I try not to write anything too controversial. That's just me. But I like to work with writers and editors that are more controversial and kind of.
Is that you being safe, or is that you being safe, or? In
a way, because I thought of our publication as well as being, you know, when you enter this thing called this art world, you're entering a network. You're entering a network of people who are already there, established, have their galleries, have their museums, are curators, you know. You're entering a network. And so it's almost like you think you're online and you're doing it, but it's just like entering any room. You're entering a room full of people who already have been there for many more years than you have. I mean, I started, like, I was a sophomore at university, like 20-year-old me, starting this blog called global@daily.com and being like, okay, let's become a publication. And we have like kind of gone through all of these ups and downs, and we're definitely in the early stages still. But anyway, so I know I'm entering this world, so I don't want to step on anybody's toes or just trying to, I just wanted to observe, understand what are the networks, what is missing from this space, because I thought there was something missing. That's why I created this platform, because this platform for young emerging voices, especially from the UAE, was missing. And I thought, how can that, like, who is going to be the audience perhaps for this? I thought of different people. I thought of different institutions. I thought as well globally, because I had the chance to travel as well with different study aways and being mixed as well, having different homes around the world. It's been fabulous to like kind of understand different cultural scenes and art scenes. And I always thought, okay, it's better that's my opinion. It's neutrality wins. And when even you look at Art Forum in that chapter, you understand that Art Forum being like the Vogue, right? Neutrality in the long term of just being, neutrality is not it's not just being all flowery and super positive all the time. It's just knowing like how to fact check, becoming very objective about this very subjective thing that is the art world, but being as objective as we can, just in terms of presentation as well, design, everything. And so, yeah, neutrality has been, that's just me. So I know I haven't gotten into trouble yet.
We were speaking about this earlier before everyone joined in. Print versus online publication. Which one do you prefer?
Well, online, I just see Danny's comment right here. Exactly. Sometimes editorial writing is not about neutrality, but positionality, actually. Yes, definitely. It's about, knowing when to be positive, when to be critical, and when you are critical, doing it in a way that is constructive and not just bashing, because again, you're part of a network. Think of art publishing. We are like, this piece of writing that we produce is being used by curators or artists when they, in their portfolio, their websites as a review of their show. So like you understand that this person you want to connect with, it's all about, it's very much about networking, this whole adventure that is publishing and PR. And like, we are in a press, right? So public relations is definitely part of what we do, in addition to the intellectual pursuits. But yes, to answer your question about online versus print, I think print is absolutely magical. I recommend everybody to do it. To do print all the time is a whole other thing. You have to become way more commercial. You have to rely on ads. Like, you become like a commercial entity, and sometimes that's beautiful, but you also lose a bit more of that intellectual freedom because you have to do shorter articles and you have different agendas to respond to. Online is beautiful because it's almost free, or the costs are very low. Cost of time is high, but in terms of overhead cost, it's low. And online is immediate, and online is also very interesting nowadays because you can link it to social media, and we all live on social media. So when we can, link our article, it's better than to have, but it's good to have both. I think as we move towards this digital world, print is going to become more and more important and more appreciated. And to be honest, also, it's about hybridity, like, this whole phygital existence. Like, why not do e-issues and then have them printed eventually? Or why not have a printed magazine that has QR codes everywhere, that has digital components to it? I think more and more we're going to go into these kinds of experiences. Yeah.
Amazing. So we don't have much time left. So if there aren't any more questions, or if there are questions, feel free to quickly drop them in so we can take them. But I think my last question, Sophie, would be, I feel like I've had quite a few lasts, but I promise this is the last one. What's next for Global Art Daily?
So we are, right now we have a beautiful new editorial board for this coming year. So we started to have editorial boards last year. Last year was very much our revival year. We were doing some print. It was here and there, a little bit, not so consistent. And then 2020, we started with our e-issues, and that has been quite a lot of articles coming in and an editorial board. So now we have a new editorial board, and I see some of our editors actually who were on this talk, like Sherry, and then Danny still is. Hi, Danny. You can say a few words as well. So we have this new editorial board, and we're going to continue our e-issues. We're thinking about different formats as well that might be a little more innovative than issues, because we are definitely way more of a geographically spaced out publication, with us being all over the world. So we don't necessarily need to follow the rules and the codes of issues 1 to 100. Like, we'll see, we might do different formats, but definitely keep the digital aspect. And then, yeah, of course, we want to go back to print eventually. We're just waiting for different, open call and different applications that we're sending for funding. Because that is the next step as well, to get some funding from institutions that are like-minded. to produce, tangible products out of this living archive that we have created, especially for the Gulf art scenes. So yeah, I don't know if Danny, you want to jump in and say quickly.
Hi everyone, thank you for having me, even if it's in the tail end. Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited to see these approximations. So many familiar faces, Rummān and Gad, quite contemporary platforms. I think for Gad, what is happening is we first decentralized where cultural production was happening. I think when Global Art Daily began, and even when it was revamped, the idea of a responsive art publication happening out of Abu Dhabi or the Gulf was not something that was very prevalent, in the sense that Global Art Daily is self-run, it's grassroots, is not doesn't have Cartier's advertising on it. um and one after we decentralize, so we're not producing out of New York or whatever. After we decentralize, we realize that actually the publication is polycentric. So there are very interesting key places where we are located and where things are happening, that inform how we do things. And it's weird and exciting to see how, like, oh, a little, Soul DXB exhibition at Manarat Sadiyat with Contact High ultimately circles back into you being in touch with so many people, and people having an input and an impact all over the world. I think definitely one thing we've talked about super quick is the idea of, again, adding an element of critical reviewing and adding much more constructive ideas and alternatives to, for example, exhibitions that are being held. Also, diversifying the voices that are involved has been something that we've been doing. And I think one thing we'll continue doing, I don't know if Sophie mentioned this, but it's the idea of holding the hands of our community, as well as shaking hands with the institution and the big names as well. We have that flexibility where, yes, we get a press release from the Louvre, as well as we get an exhibition alert from someone who's curating their first show at a garage in Dubai.
Exactly.
We have that is just a very beautiful spectrum, and we hope to continue that proximity with the whole thing. But yeah, super excited.
Different networks, that we're and building our own network of all these art contributor and critics to be, and always favoring the youth and the young and the grassroots, because that's where we come from as well.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
Bring a new generation.
And it's just so nice to inhabit sort of the discourse that is happening. The other day, I went to the Cultural Foundation here in Abu Dhabi to see the Mohammed Shabah exhibition. Who he was a member of the Casablanca Art School, and the head curator comes and she says, "Are you the guys who reviewed Mohammed Malahi at Sarkal?" And then I am asked if we can sort of do part 2 of this Casablanca unintentional review, because we happen to have been the first ones who put out the exhibition alert and among the first ones who reviewed the exhibition. And now you have the Cultural Foundation, which is the highest sort of authority in Abu Dhabi, asking to do part 2 of that. Super fascinating.
Exactly. Because we have tapped into this kind of space that is, as I was saying, like at the time when I started GAD, like I didn't see that space for independent art criticism that would be underground, that would be fast, that would be fast turnaround as well. Because you see with other kind of bigger publications, they have more of a editorial calendar they have to follow, but we can kind of go in, and we have this power, the ability on the internet to be able to publish quickly.
Actually, just a question, if you can, short, quickly answer that. You said, you were the first to review and the first to put out. So does it get competitive this way, wherein, you need to be the first to get your hands on the feature, or like how does that work? How do you stay on top of your game?
I mean, that's kind of part of being, especially in publishing, like you have to act fast and you have to understand when story is interesting. Also thinking of contributors, because a lot of contributors as well cross-publish between different publications, right? And so maybe they will write the story, but then they'll give it to another publication, not to us. And we have to think about that, and we have to think about different, but we have managed to be quite fast because of this team that is located a bit everywhere, across time zones, everything. Like we are, in a way, we cover a wide range of hours during the day. And and also just in terms of the stories that we choose to publish, I think we are sometimes the only publication that will publish a story about, for example, that show in a warehouse in Osaka or in Dubai or in, like it's very niche, and we have the privilege to be connected with these people that are doing amazing things. And so in that sense, we can have a little more leeway with time because we know that we will be providing the main criticism for that.
Akid, I just have a real quick example. So if you look up Ogamdo Abu Dhabi, which is the largest exhibition of Korean art, I think, to date in the Gulf, the first result that comes up is Global Art Daily's review of it. Everything else is usually exhibition alerts or like, oh, there is this event happening. We're the only, I think, existing like review of it. Yes. And on top of that, we found a Korean cultural manager based out of Ras Al Khaimah, who's both an expert in cultural affairs in the UAE and Korea, and she's 23.
Exactly.
And we realized, out of all people,
went to our school, so that's why we know her as well.
Yeah, but we realized that this person is the obvious, most natural, right voice to cover the story of UAE and Korea approximating at an exhibition, right? So to the extent of being like multiple times followed up by the Korean Cultural Agency to make sure the review was out. It's fascinating, Yani, that this exhibition was the first big show put fully digitalized out of Manadat Saadiyat. It's between two states. It's not even like two curators. It's two states coming together, and we're the only living review of it, to my knowledge, right?
Yeah.
And according
to you're right. You're right. Because as well, it was a show that was, it was also during the pandemic, because we were super active in 2020, and that was really great for us to kind of position ourselves. Maybe at that time you would have had maybe some kind of critics or reviewers coming in from bigger publications and visiting the show. But just in terms of that, we've seen, the reality is that we were living on Saadiyat Island while the Louvre was being constructed 500 meters away from us. We have seen how the local UAE art scene, especially in Abu Dhabi compared to Dubai, that's way more active, but in Abu Dhabi, how small and grassroots everything was, but at the same time, so much international attention and so many investments and kind of huge projects. And that's why I thought this is crazy that there's not, a proper art criticism structure for all of these incredible events and exhibitions and artists that are coming through the city. But as I was saying in the book, first you build a street, then you build, literally we've seen it all, especially on Saadiyat, from this, but it was an archaeological remain, actually. Saadiyat is not necessarily new, but from roads to street lights to a museum to art criticism. This is the story of Saadiyat Island and Global Art Daily and NYU Abu Dhabi that we have to thank for, because a lot of all of this comes from NYU Abu Dhabi and the vision they had to bring young kids from everywhere, all 113 nationalities, on Saadiyat Island at 18 years old, giving them this world-class education, preparing them to be, leaders in today's globalized cosmopolitan world, and giving them the opportunity to be living in the UAE and live and breathe, UAE's air for 4 years and understand what it means to actually live there and be there and understand the local narratives that are at play. And bringing all of these people from different cultural backgrounds, that was the vision, and I hope that we carry that vision within the contemporary art world and arts publishing.
100%. Yeah. Thank you so much, Danny, for sharing your insights, and thank you so much, Sophie, for joining in, and to everyone else who has joined in from halfway across the world. It's been wonderful knowing more about you, your work, and Global Art Daily, and where it's headed. I think we're done for today. We've reached an hour, so I think we're going to wrap up now. Please look out for the details on the next session that will take place at our usual time, 7 p.m. on Tuesday, June 8th, where we discuss the chapter The Studio Visits with yet another guest speaker who will be revealed shortly. If you have any feedback or comments on how you found the session or what you would like to see more in the next session, feel free to drop us a message on Rummān Collective. You can send us a DM or send us an email. Of course, at the end, with everything that's happening around the world, please do keep praying for Palestinians and everyone all over the world who's going through injustice, and keep them in your thoughts and your prayers, and hopefully see you all next week. Thank you again, Sophie, and thank you everyone else.
Thank you so much. Really enjoyed this talk, and yeah, please make sure to follow Global Art Daily, follow our news, and always, if anybody has questions or anything, you can always reach out to me. You know, I'm Sophie Arni at globalartdaily.com, and you can always reach out. I'm happy to hear your thoughts.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you, Danny. Have a great evening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.